I thought this was our time. After all the years of rebuilding from Laurel's betrayal, after the night spent consoling Parker through tears and confusion, I believed my son's wedding would finally heal the fractures in our family. I pictured a day bathed in laughter and emotion, where vows united us again in a new kind of hope. When Parker first asked me to underwrite the celebration, I didn't hesitate. The venue, the catering, even the flights for Laurel's side of the family, layer upon layer of costs, each one I agreed to without flinching. It's for him, I told myself, for his happiness. Jasmine reached out early on, her messages brimming with enthusiasm. Cake samples, floral arrangements, seating charts. I studied every PDF and photo as if they were secret clues to the future we might share. She called me Dad in texts, signing off with little hearts and promises of a toast in my honor. I walked through my days buoyed by the illusion of belonging, keeping spreadsheets of deposits and balances in the Notes app on my phone. Each time I clicked Submit on another payment, I felt a small burst of pride, as though I were repaying a debt accrued during years of solitary anguish and single parenting. Then came the rehearsal dinner question. I was lighthearted when I asked Parker about the plans. I pictured a cozy evening with his closest friends, maybe a speech or two, and a chance to double-check every detail before the big day. Instead, Parker's voice went flat. The pause felt like a splinter under my skin. And then he said, "You're not needed that day, Dad." A casual dismissal, tossed off without apology. My heart pinched with confusion. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already felt the answer forming in his tone. He told me not to worry. Mason would handle the welcome toast and coordinate the seating. Mason, the man who filled the void left by Laurel years ago, the one who moved into our home as if he'd always belonged. The same man I caught sleeping in my old guest room when I returned early one evening, the one who had extinguished my trust with every smile he shared with my son. I swallowed hard, blinking back the sudden sting of betrayal all over again. I tried to laugh it off, to make a joke about not being much of a public speaker, but Parker had already hung up. I stared at my phone, the glow reflecting off the kitchen table where I'd laid out receipts for the tuxedo fitting. Every cost I'd covered, every extravagant flourish I'd been so proud to fund, suddenly it all felt like a trap. I imagined them gathering around a table, glasses raised to me in absentia, while Mason, with his easy charm and unearned intimacy, stood center stage as father of the groom. I pictured Jasmine introducing him with kind words I would never hear, her smile directed toward my rival while I remained invisible. In the days that followed, I tried to hold on to hope. I texted Jasmine, looking forward to the rehearsal dinner. What time should I arrive? No response. I called Parker, sent me to voicemail. I emailed the wedding planner. Any updates on my role? Nothing. The silence felt deliberate, suffocating. Each unanswered message dug deeper into the raw wound that Laurel's affair had reopened, the one I'd thought was finally healing. At night, I replayed every interaction with my son since his engagement. I remembered late-night phone calls when he wanted advice about choosing a caterer, afternoons when he left his childhood baseball glove in my study and asked me to give it to him at the ceremony. How could those moments vanish so completely? How had I become a financier rather than a father? The realization settled over me like a slow storm. I was only valuable to them when money was involved, when my name showed up on bills and checks. Beyond that, I might as well not exist. The final straw came when a wedding update arrived in my inbox, not from Jasmine or Parker, but from the finance office of the venue. Attached was a detailed invoice shoulder tap to my account, including a note of thanks. "Thank you for your generous contributions. Your involvement has been invaluable." No warm greeting, no personal acknowledgement, just the cold precision of accounting software. My blood ran cold as I scrolled past line items for the florist, the band, the photographer. Every dollar I'd committed was cataloged, every deposit logged under my name alone. I closed my laptop with a sharp snap that echoed through the empty living room. In that moment, the full weight of their deception landed on me. I wasn't handing money to my son. I was bankrolling an event that would elevate Mason to the role of father in every public memory. A wedding celebrating the union of my son and his bride, presided over by the man who shattered my marriage. I didn't scream. I didn't send an accusatory text. I simply sat still, letting the realization wash over me. The hurt was acute and white-hot, but beneath it lay something darker, a cold, precise indignation. I would not let them monetize my love without consequence. Not again. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. My finger hovered over cancel payment on the catering invoice. I thought of every speech I would never give, every father-son dance I was no longer invited to share. And with deliberate calm, I tapped cancel. Then I moved to the next payment and the next. One by one, the transactions reversed, leaving a string of emails in my inbox bearing subject lines like refund processed and deposit returned. As each confirmation arrived, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. The silence in the house seemed less ominous, more like the hush that follows a storm's passing. I hadn't abandoned my son. I had reclaimed my dignity. They would learn that money could not buy respect or replace the years I'd sacrificed to raise Parker alone. By the time I closed the final refund notification, I no longer felt like the charity case husband or the unwelcome guest. I was simply a man who refused to be erased. And if that meant watching their carefully orchestrated day collapse into disarray, then so be it. I had learned that some lies demanded a reckoning more powerful than forgiveness, and sometimes, the most eloquent statement is a budget withdrawn and a presence uninvited. When Ray called and asked if his wife could join us at the wedding, I didn't hesitate. Ray and I had been friends since college. He'd stood beside me when Laurel walked out, and I'd been his best man when he married Marisol. Of course his wife belonged. Of course there was space for them both. I checked my email later that evening and saw a message from the couple's shared inbox. Looking forward to seeing you both next month. I smiled, imagining their arrival, picturing Ray's easy laugh echoing against the dance floor and Marisol's soft smile as she greeted Jenna. I forwarded the invitation to Jenna without a second thought. The next morning, I mentioned it to her over coffee, stirring sugar into my mug while the steam curled like secrets in the air. She frowned. "Did you actually get a printed invite?" she asked. I thought I'd see it by now. I waved her concern away, citing email glitches and postal delays. But a seed of doubt took root in my stomach. Later that day, I called the wedding planner. Her voice was polite but clipped. "We sent all invites 2 weeks ago," she said. "Let me confirm the mailing list." Her pause felt ominous. When she returned to the line, she sounded practiced. "Mr. Lawson, I'm sorry. Your name isn't on the list." A prickle of panic crawled down my spine. "Not on the list?" I repeated, as if the words would reassemble themselves into something less absurd. "But I paid for the venue, the florist, the invitations, everything is under my name." I heard a soft click on the other end, as though she was tapping on her screen. "I understand your frustration. I see invitations addressed to Mr. Mason Thompson, listed as father of the groom, and to Mrs. Laurel Thompson, Mr. Parker Lawson, and Miss Jasmine Reynolds. There's no Mr. or Mrs. Lawson, nor anyone under your name." My coffee mug slid off the table with a clatter, as if to signal the collapse of everything I'd believed. I hung up and called Jenna, my heart hammering. I wanted to shield her from the embarrassment, but I needed her input, her solidarity. When she answered, I tried to sound calm. "They didn't send our invitations," I said, choosing my words slowly. She was silent for a moment, and I feared she was about to accuse me of interfering. Instead, she sighed. "I figured as much," she admitted. "Jasmine texted me last night to say she dropped off extras for her dad, Mason, and that Laurel was picking them up. But nothing for us." There it was, confirmed in her gentle voice. We were optional. I spent the rest of the day replaying every interaction since the engagement announcement. Parker telling me how much he appreciated my support, Jasmine calling me dad, Laurel claiming she just wanted everything to come together smoothly. Had I been so blinded by relief that I missed the cues? The rushed phone call from Mason whispering in Parker's ear about seating logistics? The way Laurel's eyes flicked over my shoulder at rehearsal dinners, sizing up my presence like an unwanted guest at her own party? It was all too clear now. Their kindness had been a facade, a performance designed to keep me paying until the final act. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened the folder full of wedding contracts and receipts. Each PDF bore my name in the header, each contract signed by me as guarantor. My finger traced the lines of the invitation contract: quantity, design, postage, threshold minimums, delivery dates. A faint tremor ran through my hand as I realized my role had been reduced to that of a vendor, nothing more than the account number attached to the guest list. I wasn't invited. I was the finance department. I drafted an email to the planner, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I started and stopped, oscillating between fury and sorrow. In the end, I wrote simply, "Please confirm that no invitations were sent to me or to Jenna under our shared name," and forward to me the printed guest list and seating chart for review. I hit send and watched the cursor blink, marking the start of my demand for accountability. My phone buzzed the next morning with an automated reply. Your request has been received. We will respond within 48 hours. 48 hours of waiting felt like a lifetime. I tried to distract myself by reviewing photos of the vineyard venue, envisioning the rows of grapevines swaying in the breeze, the white chairs set in perfect alignment, the arch bedecked with lilies and ivy. But every image felt hollow, vacant of my presence. I drank my coffee black, unable to swallow sugar when everything tasted of betrayal. On the third day, the response arrived. The wedding planner's email was brief. As requested, here is the guest list. Your name and Ms. Lawson's name do not appear. The father of the groom is listed as Mason Thompson. The seating chart, attached, shows Mr. and Mrs. Thompson at the head table alongside the couple. My chest tightened so severely that I couldn't draw a breath. I clicked the seating chart and stared at the digital map. My chair absent, Mason's phalanx of family members presiding where I should have sat. I closed my eyes, imagining the ceremonial. Jasmine and Parker exchanging vows under the arbor as I watched from a distance, neck craned, powerless and unwelcome. I forwarded the chart to Jenna with a note, just so you know what they planned. She replied instantly, her words laced with empathy and rage. This is monstrous, she wrote. Let me handle them. But I shook my head. No, this was my fight. I had to stand for myself. I had to show them that my love, my sacrifice, and my dignity weren't for sale. That afternoon, I picked up the phone again. This time I called Mason. My heart thundered as the line rang. When he answered, his voice was light, rehearsed. Hey, Dad, he said, like we were co-conspirators. I responded with measured calm. I understand you've been handling a lot of the wedding details. I'd appreciate a moment to discuss why Jenna and I haven't received invitations. His pause was audible, just long enough to betray discomfort. Then he said, let's talk later. And he hung up. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the full weight of the silence he left behind. It wasn't just a snub. It was a declaration. I no longer belonged. They had crafted a new family narrative that excluded me completely. I could feel the bride's delicate smile at rehearsal luncheons, the brother's confident whisper in my son's ear, the father's ring on Mason's hand, symbolizing authority in a role I'd held since my son's first breath. Yet, amid the hurt, I sensed something stirring, a fierce clarity. I realized that invitations could be printed, guest lists could be manipulated, but love and history could not be so easily erased. I had built this life with Parker through countless nights of worry and unwavering presence. No printed invitation could supersede years of memories. And if they wanted to stage a wedding that pretended otherwise, I was determined to stage my own reckoning. That evening, I drafted a letter to Parker, not accusing, not pleading, simply stating facts. I reviewed each line, ensuring my tone was unyielding yet honest. I saved it as a PDF, but I didn't send it. Instead, I printed it and placed it in an envelope addressed to him, with no return address. I slid it beneath the door of his apartment building on my way out, packing it with every ounce of the dignity they tried to discard. As I walked away, I felt lighter, resolved. The invitation they never sent spoke volumes about their intentions. The silence that followed would speak volumes about mine. And while they assembled a wedding that excluded me, I would craft a new chapter in which I reclaimed my worth, one unbounded by paper, pen, or protocol. I arrived at the Thompson family home late that afternoon, the sky low and overcast, as if weather itself anticipated the tension I was about to face. Jenna sat beside me in the car, her hand resting lightly on mine, offering silent support as we approached the ornate iron gates. Behind them, the sprawling lawn glittered with dew, and beyond, through the arched windows of the veranda, I could glimpse clusters of relatives and friends gathered around cocktail tables, glasses in hand. Laughter drifted out, bright and casual, completely oblivious to my purpose there. I swallowed hard, the memory of my canceled reservations still fresh in my mind, and reminded myself I had not come to plead or bargain. I had come to witness the truth. Stepping onto the gravel drive, I felt the crunch of stones beneath my shoes as I walked toward the entrance. The sight that greeted me in the foyer was a flurry of pastel dresses and crisp suits, a panorama of smiles and chattering voices. Jasmine flitted through the crowd like a butterfly, her laughter tinkling above the rest, while Laurel hovered nearby, her posture immaculate, lips curved in practiced geniality. Mason, tall and self-assured, stood at the center of the room, engaging Parker in what appeared to be a hearty debate about the dinner menu. They leaned toward each other, elbows brushing, heads close together in conspiratorial ease. In that moment, I realized the depth of the ruse. Their unity was so seamless they no longer needed to hide the replacement. Mason had claimed my seat, my role, my title, and every warm exchange between father and son now belonged to him. I paused at the edge of the crowd, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward me. I had anticipated hostility, angry glances, gossip whispered behind raised hands, but what I saw instead was a disconcerting blend of curiosity and polite disapproval, as though I had intruded on an exclusive event by mistake. A woman I barely recognized raised her glass in a tentative wave. A cousin I hadn't seen since Parker's childhood nodded stiffly, eyes flicking to Mason, seeking approval. There was no outright animosity, only the chill of exclusion. I straightened my shoulders and swallowed a protest lodged in my throat. I would not flinch. I would not cower. I would speak. Taking a deep breath, I wove my way through the clusters of guests until I found Parker at the edge of the veranda, overlooking the rose garden. He turned when he saw me, his expression unreadable, the easy smile he once reserved for me replaced by a polite tilt of the head. "Dad," he said, voice neutral. He held a glass of champagne, the bubbles rising in frantic celebration, reflections dancing on the surface. I noticed that the flute bore a custom engraving to love, laughter, and new beginnings, but no mention of my name. The dedication was as ghostly as I felt. "Parker," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache pooling in my chest. "Thank you for inviting me." My words felt hollow, rehearsed, but I forced sincerity into them. I lifted my own glass, empty, for I had not been served, and let my gaze drift across the gathering. "I didn't know you were planning a toast," I added, "but I'd like one too." He raised an eyebrow, a gesture so arrogant I flinched. "Jasmine and Laurel requested that Mason handle the speeches," he said, as though I were a bystander in my own son's celebration. He sipped his champagne, then continued softly, "I didn't want to put you on the spot." I stared at him, stunned by the casual cruelty in his tone. "On the spot?" I echoed. "Parker, do you have any idea what it's like to stand in someone else's shadow?" I felt a sudden surge of anger, the ache in my chest morphing into a hot flame of betrayal. "You've handed him the microphone and the words I spent a lifetime earning." I paused, letting the accusation hang in the air like a challenge. Around us, the festivities continued, laughter, the tinkling of glass, the gentle hum of conversations, but none of it grounded me anymore. I stood on a fractured foundation, my relevance stripped away by the son I had raised. Parker's jaw clenched, and for a moment I glimpsed the boy he used to be, the child who clung to me after nightmares, who sought my counsel on school projects, who smiled with pride when I turned cartwheels with him in the backyard. That boy had not vanished entirely. I saw him flicker behind Parker's composed facade, but he was silenced by loyalty to a man who offered smooth sympathy in place of a father's firm challenge. I realized then that my son was not deliberately cruel. He had been seduced by comfort and flattery, seduced to believe that his life was more whole with Mason's gentle voice than my rough honesty. So I raised my empty glass and spoke, my voice echoing against the stone walls. "Everyone here is toasting the future," I said, tone clear and unwavering. "But let us not forget the past that brought us here." Conversations around us quieted, and I felt a dozen pairs of eyes turn in my direction. Jasmine faltered mid-laugh, her gaze shifting from Mason's approving smile to the look on my face, defiant, unbowed. I scanned the group and locked eyes with Laurel, whose perfect composure wavered. The crowd leaned in, curiosity replacing avoidance. "I may not be giving a speech tonight," I continued, voice gathering strength, "but I have lived every moment that led to this celebration. I have loved my son through heartbreak and hardship, and I have invested in his happiness without hesitation. And if anyone here thinks that devotion can be replaced by polite accommodations, I ask you to reconsider." A stunned hush fell. I saw Mason's face blanch, uncertain whether to intervene. Parker's mouth worked, but no words emerged. Laurel's lips parted, her usual mask slipping enough for a flicker of guilt to shine through. The moment stretched, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Then I lowered my glass, its emptiness symbolizing the space they had carved out for me. As I set it on the railing, I felt the admiring, uncomfortable stares of the guests upon me, caught between the man they'd planned to honor and the man who refused to be erased. I turned away from the veranda, my chest heaving with suppressed emotion. Jenna fell into step beside me without a word, her presence steadying. We walked across the dew-slick grass, leaving the stunned assembly behind, the echo of my words mingling with the fading light. In that moment, I realized that a toast could be more than a perfunctory formality. It could be a declaration of truth. And while Mason held the official title, I had claimed the only thing that could never be withdrawn: my integrity. We climbed back into the car in silence, and I watched the Thompson home recede in the rearview mirror. The soft glow of lanterns flickered along the veranda, like ghosts of celebration haunting our departure. But I did not look back. I held Jenna's hand, and in her eyes, I found affirmation. No ceremony could rewrite my story. No orchestration of speeches could diminish the years of love that formed its backbone. They could toast to new beginnings, but I was already forging mine, one defined not by exclusion but by an unbreakable bond between father and son, forged in honesty and sacrifice. And though that bond now spanned a chasm of misunderstanding, I held fast to the knowledge that truth, once spoken, could never be unspoken. I drove to Parker's apartment the next afternoon with a storm churning in my chest, the city's traffic sluicing past my windows like rivers flooding their banks. Jenna sat beside me, her hand resting on my arm in quiet solidarity, but I felt an old, familiar emptiness hollowing me from the inside. The moment I dreaded had arrived. I needed answers. I needed to look my son in the eye and ask whether he truly believed that Mason Thompson, the man who'd shattered our family, was more deserving of the title father than I ever had been. When I arrived, the intercom buzzed. I pictured Parker's face behind the small speaker, casual as always, until the moment he realized who stood outside. I buzzed in and climbed the stairs two at a time, my heart pounding so fiercely I thought he'd hear it through the door. Jenna's hand dropped mine as I reached for the knob. I paused, inhaled, and knocked with a calmness I forced into my bones. The door swung open before I could lift my hand fully, and Parker stood there in a dark t-shirt and sweatpants, the guise of casual comfort at odds with the rigid tension I saw in his posture. His eyes flickered to the driver's seat of my car through the window behind me, then settled on my face with an expression I could not read. "Come in," he said, voice even, as if we were about to discuss the weather rather than bulldoze the remains of a father-son relationship. I stepped inside, the familiarity of his apartment greeting me, the framed photos of his childhood baseball team on the wall, a dusty guitar in the corner I once coaxed him to learn, the sofa where we'd watched movies and shared popcorn during lazy Sunday afternoons. Memories, good ones, lurched forward and nearly broke me. But I collected myself and met his gaze. "Thanks for seeing me," I said, sliding onto one of the stools at his kitchen counter. He remained standing, looming over me with a poised neutrality that spoke volumes. "I know things have been awkward," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "About the wedding." I sat up straighter, prepared to let him smooth it over with familiar excuses. Instead, he said, "Look, Dad, I know you feel hurt, but Mason has been present for me in ways you haven't." My chest tightened at the accusation, ways I hadn't. I pressed my hands to my knees, as if bracing for an impact. I said, "Parker, we need clarity. Is Mason replacing me in your life, or at least at that ceremony?" My voice held just enough edge to cut through the calm facade. He nodded, shoulders sagging slightly under the weight of my question. "He's been there," he confessed, "when I needed someone to listen without judgment." His eyes glistened, betraying guilt. He chose to be my father. The words hit me like a physical blow. I closed my eyes against a well of tears I refused to let spill. "Chose to be your father," I repeated, tasting the bitter irony. "I raised you from the moment you were born through asthma attacks that kept us both up all night. I attended every football game, every parent-teacher conference, every awkward school presentation. I was there for your first car, for your college applications, for the nights you called me in tears when Mom left." I saw his gaze flick downward at my hands, weathered, scarred from years of labor. But then he looked back up, his defenses firming. He swallowed. "I know you were there, but you were always cold." The word landed with ice in my veins. "Cold," he said again, like a verdict. "Mason makes people feel wanted." My throat constricted around his words, but I forced a calm breath. "Do you think I never wanted you?" I asked quietly, and he didn't answer. I pressed on. "Do you think I never tried?" He closed his eyes, lips pressed. When he opened them, there was a sorrow there that pierced me more than anger ever could. "You did try," he said softly, "but every time I needed empathy, you gave me advice." He paused, looking away and then back. When I failed a midterm, you told me to work harder. When I asked why Mom left us, you said some questions don't have answers. But when I broke up with Jessica and cried for hours, Mason didn't lecture me. He sat with me, listened to every word, and let me feel what I needed to feel. I felt a rush of regret and frustration. I never wanted to lecture you, I protested. My voice caught. I closed my eyes again to dam the flood. I just thought that helping you solve problems was what a father does. His shoulders softened, but his expression remained guarded. He took a step closer and rested a hand on the counter, near mine. The proximity felt both comforting and cruel. You did a lot for me, he said, but sometimes I needed someone to simply be there. His gaze searched mine, as though desperate for me to understand. He made space for me to be vulnerable without fixing me. I swallowed and thought of the nights I rocked him through fever, of the mornings I packed his lunch before heading to work, of the hours I spent driving him to therapy when his chest tightened and tears welled. I thought of every moment my love had manifested as tangible support rather than emotional warmth. And I realized the truth he spoke was not a rejection of my love, but an expression of my shortcomings. I said, I'm sorry, son. I've heard you. I felt his chest rise and fall, the pause that followed laden with unspoken emotions. But I need you to hear me, I continued. There are parts of your life I couldn't fill, yes. I'm not perfect. But there's no lesson Mason can teach you that I haven't tried to teach you in my own flawed way. Accountability, resilience, integrity, I hope those were fatherly gifts too. His gaze softened further, and he sank onto the stool opposite me. Jenna hovered in the background, her presence a steady anchor. Parker rubbed his palms together, a habit from childhood when he was nervous about tests. I know, he said. I know you gave me everything you could, and I appreciate that more than I've ever said. He cleared his throat. I didn't intend to hurt you. I closed my eyes to steady the trembling in my voice. I don't need an apology, I said. I need to know if you still want me around. He met my gaze squarely. I do, he said without hesitation. My eyes flew open. Then why? I started, and he held up a hand. It wasn't about choosing one father over another, he insisted. It was about finding someone who saw me without judgment when I felt lost. I needed someone different, and Mason filled that gap. But that doesn't mean I want you gone. You're still my father. I felt the tension in my chest ease, relief mingling with the ache of realization. I'm willing to learn how to be that father, I said. If you'll let me. He nodded, and a fragile truce formed between us. Jenna stepped forward and placed a hand on each of our shoulders. In that small, crowded kitchen, the three of us forged a new understanding. Later, as I walked back to my car, the spring air felt gentler, the city noise less overwhelming. I knew the road ahead would be winding, full of long conversations and listening sessions I had never mastered. But for the first time in months, I felt the possibility of renewal rather than abandonment. Mason might have been the father Parker turned to in his darkest hour, but I was still the man who loved him first. And as long as I was willing to grow, there was hope that the title father could be shared again, earned not by obligation or payment, but by presence and understanding. My phone buzzed that afternoon with a notification from Jasmine. We appreciate everything you've contributed. The wedding wouldn't be possible without you, followed by a heart emoji. I stared at the message, the warmth of her words clashing jarringly with the hollow ache in my chest. It hit me then as sharply as any insult. I wasn't a guest at my son's celebration. I was a vendor. The vendor with the deepest pockets. The wallet they tapped until its last note. The realization settled over me like cold rain, each drop a reminder that my years of sacrifice had been reduced to a line item. I closed my eyes against the glare of the afternoon sun streaming through the blinds. In that moment, I saw every invoice, every deposit, every contract I'd signed in pursuit of family redemption. I remembered the excitement I'd felt when I authorized the deposit for the custom tint, when I clicked confirm on the order for the crystal lighting and the sculpted ice bar. I recalled the pride swelling in my chest as I wired funds for the premium wine package and the gourmet hors d'oeuvres. All of it under my name, all of it bought with the currency of my own bruised heart. Still seated at my desk, I opened my laptop and navigated to the folder labeled Wedding Expenses. One by one, I clicked open PDFs of receipts, the vineyard invoice, the photographer's contract, the caterer's estimate. Each document listed me as guarantor. Every signature bore my name, Robert Lawson. I scrolled through spreadsheets I had lovingly maintained, columns of dates, vendors, amounts paid, balances due. With each file that loaded, I felt a mounting resolve hardening inside me. They could treat me like a wallet, but they could never touch my dignity without consequence. I began methodically reviewing the upcoming payments, scanning line items for scheduled transfers. The custom invitations were set to ship 2 weeks before the wedding. The florist had a final balance due 1 week prior. The orchestra's last installment was scheduled for the day before the ceremony. In every case, the amounts were substantial, tens of thousands in total. I pictured those checks clearing, the cash flowing into their celebration even as I stood on the sidelines, unworthy of a single chair. A wave of silent fury washed through me, but beneath it was a profound clarity. If money would erase my presence, then money would undo their plans. Without hesitation, I drafted polite cancellation emails. To the caterer, due to unforeseen circumstances, we must cancel our agreement. Please refund the deposit. To the florist, thank you for your work to date. Regrettably, we need to terminate our contract effective immediately. To the venue coordinator, please halt all preparations under deposit number 4572. Funds will be reversed. Each email was clipped, professional, devoid of emotion. I refused to give them the satisfaction of anger. Instead, I wielded detachment like armor, letting the impersonal tone drive home the fact that I would not bankroll my own erasure. The responses came back swiftly. Refund processed. You will receive funds within 5 business days, and cancellation confirmed, deposit returned. As each confirmation arrived, I closed the tab and leaned back in my chair, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease incrementally. Jenna watched me from the doorway, concern etched on her face. Are you sure about this? She asked softly. I set my laptop aside and met her gaze. Absolutely, I said. They tried to buy my love and then exclude me. So I'll give them exactly what they value most. My words were steady, resolute. I saw in her eyes the same understanding and pride I once felt toward my son. Later that evening, I drove past the silent vineyard and the empty halls of the event space. The rows of grapevines stood undisturbed, the marquee unlit, the pristine lawn untouched by chairs or decorations. I pulled over and watched, imagining the chaos that would unfold when guests arrived for a wedding that no longer existed. I pictured Parker's stunned look when he realized his carefully orchestrated day had crumbled under the weight of return deposits. I pictured Laurel, poised and composed, thrown off balance by the very budget that had empowered her. And I pictured Jasmine, tears in her eyes, finally seeing me not as a vendor but as a man who refused to be taken for granted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, I felt a quiet triumph. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't issued ultimatums or public statements. I simply let the truth of my worth speak through the absence of funds. No guests, no music, no flowers, only the silence of their failed celebration. And in that silence, I reclaimed something I thought I'd lost, the knowledge that my contributions were driven by love, not obligation, and that love could not be commodified. Driving home, I thought of the years I'd spent providing for Parker, often at the expense of my own comfort. I remembered the nights I lay awake worrying about mortgages and tuition bills, always believing that financial security was the greatest gift I could give. Now I knew that presence, respect, and emotional availability carried more weight than any checkbook. My heart swelled with a new kind of hope, that by standing firm, I might teach my son a lesson far more valuable than any wedding feast. When I unlocked the front door and stepped into the quiet sanctuary of our home, Jenna closed the distance between us and slipped her hand into mine. You did the right thing, she whispered. I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me that no sum of money could ever buy. In the silence that followed, I realized that true reconciliation would require more than canceled contracts and returned deposits. But it would begin with the unwavering conviction that I would never again be reduced to a mere checkbook. The morning after I issued the final cancellations, I awoke to a silence so profound it felt like a presence in itself. No birdsong at the window, no hum of preparations in the distance, no reminders of the day I had unwittingly funded into existence. Instead, there was only the steady tick of the clock on the mantel, marking time as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I knew that, and so did they, even if they refused to see it. Jenna found me in the study, leaning back in the leather chair, fingers steepled beneath my chin. The spreadsheet on my laptop screen was blank, its rows of deposits and vendor names replaced by a single line reading, "All cancellations confirmed." She placed a mug of coffee beside me, its steam rising in tendrils of comfort. "How do you feel?" she asked. I took a slow sip, tasting the bitterness as a reminder of the bracing clarity I now possessed. "Relieved," I said quietly, "and strangely at peace." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the same relief and the unspoken question, "What now?" I closed the laptop and pushed it aside. "They won't see this coming," I said. "No one does." My words hung in the air as the first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, illuminating motes that danced like witnesses to my quiet revolution. It wasn't vengeance that drove me. It was a reclaiming of self-respect. If they believed my worth could be measured by lines on a balance sheet, I would redefine the ledger and then vanish from their accounts forever. By mid-morning, the venue manager's voicemail began blinking on my phone. I listened to each message without returning a single call. Apologies, frantic requests for clarification, assurances that the next deposit window would allow them to reinstate services if they could just get in touch. But I didn't respond. I had no interest in reactivating a celebration built on deception. I watched the red notification light dissolve, one message at a time, savoring the reality that their panic could not reclaim what I had willingly surrendered, control over my own generosity. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with Jenna and drafted a brief note to Parker. I wrote in straightforward terms, "I have canceled all wedding-related services and returned all deposits. Our contributions were never acknowledged as part of the family, only as transactions. I cannot support an event that erases my role as your father." I hesitated only briefly before tearing the page from the pad and sealing it in an envelope addressed simply to Parker Lawson. No greeting, no flourish, just the facts and a statement of principle. I asked Jenna to deliver it. She agreed without hesitation, understanding that some lines needed to be drawn clearly and uncrossed. As evening approached, I drove past the now empty reception hall one more time. The marquee's letters spelling congratulations had been taken down, leaving only the framework. The parking lot lay deserted, its asphalt riddled with oil stains and fallen leaves. I imagined the caterers, the decorators, the musicians, all left with canceled shifts and returned payments, their schedules upended, their livelihoods momentarily disrupted. A part of me felt a twinge of guilt for the collateral damage, but I knew it paled compared to the deeper injustice I had endured. This was the cost of standing up for respect. Back home, Jenna and I settled into the living room, the soft lamplight casting long shadows that stretched across the rug. I made tea, no sugar this time, and we sat in companionable silence, each processing the day's events in our own way. At one point, she reached across and took my hand. "Do you regret it?" she asked, voice gentle. I considered her question, weighing regret against the calm that had replaced my earlier turmoil. "No," I said firmly. "I've regretted many things in my life, but this isn't one of them." The next morning, the postman delivered a letter slipped under our door. I picked it up and recognized Parker's handwriting instantly. Neat cursive, precise loops. My chest tightened as I broke the seal and unfolded the paper. His words were measured, neither apologetic nor accusatory, but they held an undercurrent of vulnerability I hadn't heard in weeks. He wrote about confusion and frustration, about feeling caught between two worlds, one where I was the provider he always knew, and another where Mason had filled the emotional gaps I seemed unable to bridge. He asked for a conversation, for a chance to explain himself face to face. Reading his words, I felt the walls I had built begin to tremble. Minutes later, Jenna found me standing on the porch, the letter in my hand. "He wants to talk," I said, and she nodded, her expression hopeful. "Then we'll give him that chance," she replied. "When you're ready." I looked at the sky, bright, clear, as though urging me toward reconciliation. I knew I was ready, even if fear whispered otherwise. 2 days later, I stood in Parker's apartment once more, the fluorescent light marginally softer than before, but the tension palpably unchanged. He greeted me with a tentative hug, and I felt the familiar ache of both love and estrangement. We settled at the kitchen counter, our chairs a polite distance apart, but our hands eventually meeting on the cool surface. He spoke first, his voice raw. "I was blind to how much I hurt you," he said. I didn't see that my actions spoke louder than my apologies. His admission felt like a balm to my wounded pride, and I realized that the quiet collapse I had orchestrated had created space for truth to surface. As he spoke, the weight that had pressed on my shoulders for weeks began to lift. The buildings, the contracts, the canceled services, all had been means to an end, to force a reckoning that words alone might never have achieved. In the hush of that kitchen, I recognized that respect, once broken, demands a hard reset. And during those silent days of absence and absence only, we both found what we needed: honesty. When Parker finished, I reached across and clasped his hand. "I canceled those services because I had to fight for my place in your life," I said. "But I never wanted to fight you. I want to build a new understanding, one where we both feel seen." His eyes glistened as he nodded, and in that shared space of vulnerability, we began to rebuild. Later that evening, Jenna and I drove home in companionable silence, the quiet collapse of the past days giving way to tentative hope. I glanced over at her, gratitude shining in my eyes. "Thank you," I said softly, "for everything." She smiled and reached out, squeezing my hand. I knew the road ahead would still have bumps. Wedding plans might resume in some form. Emotions would flare again, and the shadow of Mason's role would linger. But for the first time, I believed we could navigate it together, grounded in honesty and mutual respect. In the days that followed, I updated my calendar. A lunch with Parker, a weekend at his apartment to help with furniture, and even a casual visit to the vineyard, this time as his father, not as a financier. Each entry felt like a promise, a pledge that I would be present, attentive, and open. And for the first time in months, I went to sleep without the knot of anger in my chest, replaced by the quiet certainty that I had reclaimed my place. Not through grand gestures or silent sabotage, but through the collapse and reconstruction of truth. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and bright, birdsong full of promise that felt cruelly ironic as I drove past the silent entrance to the venue. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather cool beneath my palms, and stared at the empty lawn where white chairs should have gleamed in neat rows. No floral arches broke the horizon, no tables were set, no gentle hum of staff rushing through final preparations stirred the air. Instead, the grounds lay abandoned, a vast canvas wiped clean of every trace of celebration. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in my shoulders uncoil into an emptiness that both stung and soothed. At last, the scene perfectly reflected the truth I had refused to ignore. I stepped from the car, my shoes crunching on gravel as I approached the main doors. The silence was so absolute I could almost hear the echo of every guest's unanswered question. A stray program lay in the drive, its glossy pages fluttering in the breeze like a wounded bird. I picked it up and let it fall from my fingers. The wind carried it away before I could read a single name. My pulse thrummed in my ears as I remembered the dozens of times I'd saved money to give Parker a future, the nights I'd lain awake counting every expense so that nothing would go wrong. Now, nothing would go right. I wandered into what should have been the reception hall, its sliding glass doors locked tight. The foyer was empty, the coat racks bare, and the scent of fresh paint lingered where festoons of flowers once promised romance. I pressed my palm against the glass, imagining the vibrant chaos of cocktail hour, guests swirling like bright confetti, laughter ricocheting off the walls, the clink of glasses toasting love and unity. Instead, the space breathed abandonment, a hushed apology in every echoing footstep. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, the world tilted, but I steadied myself with the memory of every cancellation confirmation I'd received. This was no accident. My phone buzzed with dozens of missed calls, 32 from Parker, 5 from Laurel, 2 from Mason. I stared at the glowing screen and let it sink in that they wanted to salvage something I had already deemed irretrievable. I tapped Parker's number once, then again, but I could not bring myself to answer. Instead, I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked to the edge of the veranda, where single white chairs sat scattered and empty like old promises. I ran a hand along the smooth back of one, the lacquered with cold beneath my fingertips. My reflection shimmered in the glass doors behind me, an outsider looking in on a scene of my own making. I closed my eyes and recalled the day Parker was born, the weight of him in my arms so tender and new. I remembered the first time he smiled, the night spent rocking him through fevers, and the pride that welled in me when he took his first steps. That boy had been my world, my reason for every sacrifice. But this hollow spectacle, revealed how far we had drifted. I had funded a day that pretended I did not matter, and in doing so, I reclaimed the only thing that could never buy, my self-respect. Footsteps behind me made me turn. Jenna emerged from the shadows, her expression unreadable as she surveyed the empty chairs. She moved to stand beside me, her presence a small island of warmth in an ocean of silence. "They really did cancel everything," she said softly, voice carrying both wonder and sorrow. I nodded, my throat tight. I wanted them to feel it, I admitted, to understand what it means to erase someone's place in their own celebration. Her hand found mine, and I squeezed, grateful for her steady support. Together we walked through the deserted hall, echoing our own footsteps as though reclaiming the space for ourselves. I paused beneath the mason's arch where a crystal chandelier had once hung, its crystals now dark and empty. I imagined the couples who would have stood there. Jasmine clutching Parker's arm, the family smiling behind them, and felt a surge of grief for all the unspoken words and unmet expectations. Yet beneath that grief was relief. The burden of unwanted generosity had lifted, and in its place, a quiet clarity remained. As the sun climbed higher, I sensed a gentle unfolding of possibility. The wedding they had planned without me would never take place as intended, but perhaps a new beginning could emerge from these ruins. I turned to Jenna and offered a small smile. "Let's go," I said. She nodded, and we walked back to the car, leaving the empty chairs and locked doors behind us. In the rearview mirror, the venue receded into the distance, and with it, the false narrative of a father replaced by another man. Ahead lay the open road, silent, unadorned, but entirely ours to fill with truth, presence, and the slow work of rebuilding what had truly mattered all along. When the news broke, it spread through social media like wildfire. My name trended on wedding blogs and family group chats under hashtags like #SabotageByDad and #FatherOfTheGroom-Scandal. I watched the frenzy unfold from my living room couch, the glow of the television casting flickering shadows on the walls as network anchors parsed every angle of the story. They never mentioned my reasons, only the chaos, locked gates, canceled vendors, guests stranded in formal wear. They called it sabotage, a petty act of vengeance from a bitter man. I felt no regret. Instead, I sat still and absorbed the spectacle. In every clip, I saw my face superimposed over images of forlorn bridesmaids and bewildered uncles. I heard anchors ask, what drove a father to dismantle his own son's wedding? The question floated in the air, unanswered. I considered sending out a statement to clarify my motives, but I realized that silence would serve me better. Their narrative would spin without my input, exposing more about their assumptions than about my actions. Meanwhile, Parker's Instagram posted a statement, "Sabotaged by a bitter man." His words struck me like stones. I knew they came from frustration and hurt, but I felt the need to respond in kind. Yet, I stopped myself. I would not fuel the fire with public argument. Instead, I focused on the private aftermath. I walked through my house, noting the photo frames of Parker from childhood, his first swim meet, his high school graduation, his birthday parties, and felt the weight of every happy memory contrasted against the singular act. A call from Jasmine came next. Her voice trembled as she asked why I had done it. I told her, because I wouldn't be relegated to a financial footnote in my own son's life. I heard her sob on the other end, and I fought the urge to reach out. I reminded myself that distance was the conversation we needed. "I love you both," I said, "but love must be shown, not bought." Then I hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than any apology I might have offered. A few days later, I logged on to LinkedIn to find dozens of notifications, messages from industry contacts curious about the fallout, invitations to comment on leadership and ethics panels, even an offer to speak on corporate responsibility. I chuckled at the irony. My canceled contracts had led to new professional opportunities. It seemed that integrity, even when messy, held more currency than compliance. But I closed the app before responding. This was not a time for public discourse. It was time for reflection. Meanwhile, Miles, Jasmine's father, called me in private. His voice was gentle, stripped of the anger I'd heard from others. "I don't blame you," he said. He found someone easy when he was hurting. But a real father doesn't just fund weddings, he builds sons. His words, from a man I barely knew, struck deeper than anything Parker had said. I thanked him, feeling the first stirrings of pride and regret coexisting. In the days that followed, condolences and criticisms arrived in equal measure, emails from old friends expressing support, texts from extended family demanding explanation, voicemails from therapists and clergy suggesting reconciliation. I listened but did not respond. Instead, I spent my mornings at the neighborhood coffee shop, journaling my thoughts on napkins and receipts. I wrote of love, of worth, of boundaries. I wrote of a father's pain in being unseen. And in those scribbled lines, I began to see a path forward. One morning, I found a letter slipped under my door. No return address, just Parker's handwriting. "Can we talk? I'm sorry for my words. I don't understand everything yet, but I want to." My heart tightened at the sight of his familiar cursive. I sat with the letter for a long moment, the world outside rushing by in a blur of cars and passerby. Then I kissed the envelope and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Later that afternoon, I drove to the coffee shop where I'd first penned my reflections. Parker was waiting at a corner table, his posture tentative. As I approached, his gaze lifted, meeting mine with a complexity of remorse, confusion, and hope. He stood and embraced me, not the stiff, distant hug we'd shared weeks before, but a genuine holding on, a remembrance of our shared history. I smelled the faint trace of his cologne, limes and rain, and felt the old comfort bubble up inside me. We sat and ordered black coffee, our drinks arriving in mismatched mugs that clinked in the hush. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence was our pooled breath, a prelude to honesty. He sipped and then looked at me, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. "I judged you without understanding. You did everything you could." My throat tightened. I reached across the table and held his hand. "I'm sorry too," I whispered. I should have listened more and bought less. Outside, the sky was clearing after a storm. Inside, the tension between us eased, replaced by the fragile work of rebuilding trust. I realized then that sabotage had been a brutal but necessary catalyst. It had forced both of us to confront the truth of our bond, the failures of our communication, and the depth of our love. As we sat in that coffee shop, I understood that reconciliation would require more than words. It would demand presence, vulnerability, and time. We finished our cups, and Parker offered to walk me home. We strolled under the budding trees, side by side, not as vendor and client or father and son at odds, but simply as two people who had lost their way and now sought the same path back. And in that ordinary moment, feet crunching on the sidewalk, birdsong returning, I felt the promise of renewal. They had called it sabotage, but what it truly had been was a reckoning. And from reckoning, we would build something real. 2 weeks after the wedding that never was, I found myself standing at the kitchen counter, watching the steam spiral up from my mug of chamomile tea. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. Jenna was out running errands, and I was alone with my thoughts. Memories of my son's betrayal ricocheting through my mind like shards of broken glass. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and noticed the stack of unmailed holiday cards on the counter. Every year, Parker insisted I include a personal note. This year, I wondered if he'd even open the mailbox at all. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I glanced at it and hesitated. My finger hovered over the green icon, but I silenced the call and set the phone face down. I wasn't ready for another confrontation, another barrage of accusations or apologies that might ring hollow. Instead, I turned my attention back to the tea, drawing comfort from its warmth. And then I saw it. A small, unmarked box sitting by the door, the return address scribbled in Parker's handwriting. My heart tightened with anticipation and dread. I picked it up, feeling its weight, lighter than I expected, as though it held hardly anything at all. I carried the box to the dining table and eased off the lid. Inside lay a single item wrapped in white tissue, a charred fragment of a leather-bound envelope, its edges blackened and curling. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was one of the original contracts I had signed, the agreement for the venue, its corner reduced to ash. Beneath it, tucked between scorched papers, lay a simple note on vellum. "You can't rewrite me out of your life and still spend my money to do it. Love, Parker." No return address. No flourish. Just a signature at the bottom, elegant and final. I stared at the ashes, remembering the moment I'd mailed him the gift box. I recalled the surge of righteous anger that had fueled my actions. How I had wanted to show him that his betrayal would have consequences. I felt a pang of regret now, sharper than any anger. Here was my son, reaching across the chasm we'd created, using the very symbol of my defiance to forge a fragile bridge. He burned my contract, not to punish me further, but to speak his truth, that our relationship could not thrive on transactions alone. Gently, I lifted the charred paper and held it between my fingers. The edges crumbled beneath my touch, dusting the table with tiny flakes of ash. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. The countless nights I'd patched holes in his bike tires after soccer practice, the mornings I'd driven him to school when his asthma acted up, the hours I'd spent teaching him to ride the waves on the beach. Those moments had not needed contracts or signatures. They had needed time, attention, and love. I found a glass bowl in the cabinet and brushed the remnants of the envelope into it, collecting the ash in one place. It looked fragile, delicate, yet somehow enduring, like the bond between father and son that had been tested and nearly broken, but was now being reclaimed. I set the bowl on the windowsill, where the morning light filtered through and transformed the ash into something almost golden. It felt like an alchemy of forgiveness. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Parker. "Can we talk tonight?" No talk of wedding or money. I smiled, the weight in my chest lifting. I typed back, "Yes, tonight." Then I sent a follow-up, "Bring something light for dinner." I hesitated a moment before adding, "I love you." Hitting send felt like releasing a bird from a cage. That evening, Parker arrived carrying a bag of his favorite roast chicken and a bottle of sparkling water. The tension between us was softened by the mundane act of cooking together. He chopped vegetables, I prepared a simple salad, and we worked side by side as though nothing had happened, yet everything had. We carried our plates to the table by the window, where the bowl of ash glowed softly in the lamplight. We ate in companionable silence until Parker cleared his throat and met my gaze. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick with emotion. He gestured to the bowl. "I wanted you to see what your actions look like from my side." The ashes remind me that we both let things burn when they shouldn't have. I nodded, feeling tears prickle at the corners of my eyes. I reached across the table, brushing my fingertips against his. "I understand," I whispered. "I never meant to make you feel erased." He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. "I know, and I appreciate everything you've done. I just needed to find my own way to be heard." He opened his eyes and offered a tentative smile. "Can we start over?" I returned his smile with one of my own, deeper and more genuine than any I had offered in weeks. "We already have," I said softly, "one meal at a time." In the days that followed, the bowl of ash remained on the windowsill, a silent monument to our reconciliation. Visitors asked about it, and I explained simply, "It's a reminder that what we cherish most can be fragile. Treat it gently." And gently, we did. Parker and I rebuilt our relationship not through grand gestures or canceled contracts, but through quiet moments of shared laughter, honest conversations late into the night, and the understanding that love endures when nurtured by presence rather than purchase. The morning after our dinner of roast chicken and shared apologies, I woke to a quiet house. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in soft gold bands, painting the walls with gentle warmth. I lay still for a moment, listening to the silence I had once feared, the silence I had imposed on my family, and the silence we were learning to embrace together. It felt less like emptiness and more like an open space waiting to be filled with something honest and lasting. I rose from bed, stretched, and made my way to the living room, where the bowl of ash still perched on the windowsill, its fragile remains glinting like a promise. Jenna joined me there, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to me with a smile that spoke of shared relief and pride. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly. I took a slow sip, savoring the warmth and the rich, bitter taste that grounded me. "Hopeful," I said, setting the mug down and turning to the bowl of ash. "I never imagined we'd get here, but I'm grateful for the journey." She placed a hand on my shoulder, and together we gazed at the ashes, those charred remnants of contracts and expectations that symbolized the collapse and rebirth of our family bonds. Later that day, I texted Parker to confirm our afternoon outing. He suggested a walk along the riverbank where we used to fish when he was young. The memory made me smile. The way he'd eagerly cast his line, the way his eyes lit up when he felt a tug, no matter how small. I agreed, and he arrived at the front door 20 minutes later, carrying his fishing rod and a small tackle box. He looked more relaxed than I had seen him in weeks, his shoulders unburdened, his smile genuine. I greeted him with a nod and followed him to the car, where Jenna was waiting to join our casual father-son ritual. We drove to the river in comfortable silence, the familiar landmarks stirring memories, the old oak tree by the bridge where we carved our initials, the playground we passed on the way down a side street, the corner store where he once splurged on candy after a successful catch. When we arrived, we unloaded our gear and strolled down the grassy bank, inhaling the fresh scent of water and earth. The river's gentle current hummed beneath us, a soundtrack of continuity and change. Parker set up his rod, and I watched him patiently tie on a hook. Jenna found a spot nearby with a blanket and a thermos of lemonade, settling in to enjoy the afternoon. I cast my own line and felt the flicker of the old thrill, that moment of possibility when baited hooks slice through the air and settle into unknown depths. We fished together without words at first, the silence weaving between us not as an indictment, but as a companion. I realized that in our earlier attempts to bridge the gap, through letters, voicemails, veiled ultimatums, our voices had sometimes grown too loud, drowning out the simpler truths. Today, in silence, we were rediscovering each other. After a while, Parker shifted his weight and glanced my way. His expression was thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he began, voice low, "about what happened with the wedding. I realized I was trying to fix everything for everyone but ended up breaking the one relationship that mattered most." He paused as though searching for the right words. "You taught me to stand up for myself, even if it meant tearing down plans. And I taught myself to see beyond discomfort, to face hard truths." I listened, heart swelling with both pride and humility. I reeled in my line and set the rod aside, turning to face him fully. "I'm proud of you," I said, "for speaking your mind and demanding respect. And I'm sorry that I didn't learn sooner how to be the father you needed." He nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, the rough fabric of his shirt familiar and reassuring. "We're both better for this," I continued, "because now we know silence can hold just as much meaning as words." We spent the rest of the afternoon sharing memories and hopes for the future. I told him about my plans to retire from the firm earlier than I'd expected, to free up time for trips we'd postponed. He laughed when I joked about teaching him to drive the old family boat, and I laughed too at the prospect of him at the helm. We snapped a photo together, arms draped over each other's shoulders, the river glinting behind us in the late sun. In that frame, I saw a reflection of all we had weathered: betrayal, anger, estrangement, and now the tentative bloom of reconciliation. Driving home, the car was filled with easy conversation. Jenna sang softly along to the radio, Parker and I debated the merits of different fishing lures, and I felt a deep contentment I had not known in months. The road stretched before us, sunlight dancing across the windshield, and I realized how precious every ordinary moment had become. The silence we once used as a weapon had transformed into a space for listening and understanding. That evening, as we unpacked our gear and washed the day's dust from our hands, I paused to look around the kitchen, imagining future gatherings. Saturday breakfasts, holiday dinners, spontaneous movie nights. I understood now that invitations would not be reserved for special occasions alone. They would be extended daily through presence, attention, and love. I leaned against the counter, watching Jenna and Parker chat as they loaded the dishwasher, and felt a profound gratitude. In the days that followed, I made no grand announcements. I did not issue proclamations or host a "we're back together" celebration. Instead, I let my actions speak. Morning texts to check in, surprise home-cooked meals, genuine interest in Parker's work and relationships. And in each of those small gestures, I found that silence no longer felt like a void, but like the gentle hum beneath a melody, an invitation to listen, to reflect, and to love without conditions. As I climbed into bed that night, the house again seemed to breathe with quiet purpose. I closed my eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, and whispered into the darkness, letting the silence win was the bravest act of all. And with that thought, I surrendered to sleep, trusting that the bond we had reforged would only grow stronger in the days to come.